My daughter-in-law accidentally sent me a recording that was meant for her brother, and what I heard about my son left me frozen. The next morning, I put a plan in motion that she would never see coming. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. I was busy in the kitchen arranging spice jars on the old wooden shelf. The radio was playing with a bit of static. The news was saying something about market prices, but I wasn't paying much attention. My mind was on dinner, trying to figure out what I could make for Michael, my son, who always came home exhausted after a long day at work. Just then, my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. I quickly dried my hands and pulled out the old device Michael had bought me a few years ago. The screen lit up with a notification from Telegram. It was from Emily, my daughter-in-law. I frowned, a little confused. She hardly ever sent voice messages, especially since we all lived under the same roof. If she wanted to say something, she just had to open her mouth. Emily had left in the morning, saying she was going to see some friends. I thought maybe she wanted to ask me to pick something up, like more vegetables or milk, so I tapped to listen. But in my clumsiness while holding a salt shaker, I accidentally hit the button to save the audio to my phone. Before I could figure out what happened, I opened Telegram again and saw the message was gone. Emily typed right away. I sent that by mistake. Did you hear it, Mom? I thought for a moment and replied, No, dear. She just sent back a thumbs up emoji and said nothing more. I sat down on the wooden chair by the kitchen table, still holding the salt shaker. Suddenly, I remembered something Michael had once told me. Mom, Emily doesn't send voice messages. If she does, it must be something really important. That sentence sparked my curiosity. I opened the list of audio files on my phone, and with trembling fingers, I selected the recording I had just saved. Emily's voice came through, but it wasn't the sweet voice she used with me. It was full of annoyance, like she was venting. She called the other person bro, and I knew immediately it was Daniel, her older brother. Then she started talking about Michael. This Michael is so boring, so useless. He never makes enough money for me to live the way I deserve. I felt my heart sink. I tried to keep listening, but every word felt like a stab. She said she couldn't stand being with a man as mediocre as Michael anymore, that she wanted a divorce right now. I was frozen, clutching the phone. Emily continued in a lower voice, as if sharing a secret. She said she was wasting her time with Michael, that she dreamed of being the wife of a rich, successful man, the same one Daniel had promised to introduce her to. Then her tone lightened, followed by a little laugh, as if she'd thought of something funny. If Michael loses his reputation at the company, everything will be easier. Thanks for giving me ideas on how to make him look bad at work. That way I'll have the perfect excuse to ask for a divorce. I was in shock. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. I almost dropped the phone on the kitchen floor. Shaking, I played the recording again. Every word dug into my soul. There was no mistake. It was the voice of Emily, my daughter-in-law, the woman I had come to love like a daughter. She was plotting against my son, the boy I had dedicated my entire life to loving and protecting. I felt a lump in my throat, like something was stopping me from breathing. At that exact moment, the iron gate creaked open. Mom, I'm home. Michael's voice came through clear and full of life as always. I panicked. I quickly shoved the phone into my pocket and took a deep breath to calm down. I went out to the patio and saw Michael standing there, a huge smile on his sun-tanned face. He held up a bag of pastries from the corner bakery, the same one where I used to buy his birthday cake when he was a boy. Have you eaten yet, Mom? I brought you this pastry, the kind you like, right? He asked in his warm voice. I forced a smile. I took the bag and tried to keep my voice from shaking. Yes, I'm just making dinner now. Go take a shower, you must be tired. Michael nodded and went into the house, whistling a cheerful tune. Watching him walk away, I felt my heart break in two. How could he smile like that when the wife he loved so much was planning to destroy his life? A little while later, Emily arrived. She walked in wearing a blue dress that shimmered under the kitchen light, her hair done up in curls. She saw me chopping vegetables. She gave me a quick glance and said dryly, I already had dinner out, Mom. You two go ahead. and she went straight to her room without another word. I nodded, but inside a storm was raging. Her look, the way she walked so calmly, as if nothing was wrong, filled me with rage and helplessness. That night after Michael went to sleep, I sat in silence in the small kitchen under the dim yellow light that highlighted the cracks in the wall. The ticking of the wall clock was constant, but my mind was chaos. I couldn't sleep a wink. I looked out the window. The sky was ink black with only a few stars peeking through the thick clouds. Emily's recording kept playing in my head. Every phrase was like a needle piercing my heart. I wondered how someone who had called me Mom could say such cruel things about my son. How could she plan to ruin the life of Michael, the boy I had protected with my entire being? I got up. I walked slowly to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of cold water. My hand was shaking so much that a little water spilled onto the tile floor. I sat down again, trying to breathe deeply, but the lump in my throat wouldn't go away. Outside on the patio, the night wind seeped through the cracks in the door, bringing a chill that made me shiver. I knew then that a storm was coming, not just inside me, but for the whole family. Memories of the past began to surface as clear as if they had happened yesterday. I remembered the difficult years when my husband died suddenly from a heart attack. Michael was just 12 years old. He was too young to understand the pain of losing his father. I, a 30-year-old woman with little education, had to manage on my own to raise my son. I would get up at 4 a.m. to make tamales by the stove. The smell of corn mixed with the smoke that made my eyes water. I wrapped each tamal carefully and took them to sell at the market, no matter if the sun was scorching or if it was pouring rain. At noon, I washed and ironed clothes for the wealthy families in the neighborhood, and my hands grew rough from being in soapy water all the time. At night, I ran the small grocery store until late, counting every dollar to save for Michael's school. There were nights when exhaustion almost defeated me, but seeing Michael studying under the light of an oil lamp gave me the strength to go on. I will never forget the day he received his university degree. I wore the only dress I had without any patches and sat in a corner of the auditorium watching my son walk onto the stage. When he turned to look at me with a radiant smile, I cried like a child. Those tears weren't just from joy, but from relief after so many years of sacrifice. I thought all my effort had been worth it. Then came the day Michael introduced me to Emily. She entered the house with her long, shiny hair, a charming smile, and a box of fancy cookies in her hand. "Mom, this is Emily," Michael said, his voice full of pride. I looked at the young woman in front of me. She seemed polite and attentive. Emily used to help me set the table. Sometimes she would peel fruit or wash the dishes, and she always called me Mom, with a sweetness that melted my heart. Once, she gave me a blue shawl, saying it looked very nice on me. I was very touched. I thought my son had found a good partner, someone with whom he would build a happy family. Their wedding was simple, but very warm. The whole neighborhood came to congratulate them, and laughter filled the patio. I watched Michael and Emily exchange rings, my heart full of hope. I thought I could finally be at peace, because my son now had his own home. But just a few years later, everything started to change. Emily was no longer the sweet girl I had met. She started spending money hand over fist, constantly asking for designer clothes and expensive bags. Every time Michael refused telling her they needed to save for the future, Emily would get moody. Sometimes she would yell at him in front of me with an icy voice, "You're always thinking about saving. What's the point of living like that?" I remember one night clearly. Michael had just gotten paid, and before he could pay the rent, Emily was already asking for a Gucci bag. It cost what my son earned in a whole month. Michael shook his head and explained calmly, "Honey, we have more important things. Can we wait until next month?" Emily said nothing. She just gave him a furious look and threw the bag of groceries Michael had just bought on the floor. The container broke, and the smell of food spread everywhere. She turned and left, leaving Michael sitting in silence, picking up the pieces from the floor. His face was pale, his eyes empty. I was in a corner of the kitchen wanting to run and hug him, but my feet seemed glued to the floor. I could only turn around and pretend to be cleaning to hide my tears. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that today's recording was no surprise. It was just the tip of the iceberg that in my naivety I hadn't seen before. The times Emily got angry, the times she complained about Michael, they were all signs. I blamed myself. How could I have let my son live with someone like that without realizing it? I trusted too much. I had too much faith in a home I believed was perfect. I got up and went out to the patio. The night wind was blowing harder, carrying the smell of damp earth from the small garden. I hugged myself, feeling like my world was collapsing. I went back to the kitchen. I poured another glass of water, but this time I didn't drink. I just stood there staring at the darkness outside the window with a knot in my heart. The next morning I woke up early as usual, but with no peace in my soul. The kitchen was the same as every day. The smell of coffee filled the air, but it felt as if everything was covered in a thick fog. I tried to stay calm and made breakfast as if nothing was wrong. Toast, fried eggs, and a plate of chopped fruit. Michael sat at the table reading the newspaper, and Emily came down a little later, her hair pulled back in a ponytail and wearing a crisp white blouse. She poured the coffee, put it on the table, and turned to me with a little smile. "Mom, would you like more sugar?" I looked her straight in the eye, searching for a trace of sincerity, but all I saw was a cold fakeness. Her eyes scanned me as if she were calculating something. I nodded slightly and said in a low voice, "This is fine, dear." Inside, the rage was still burning, but I knew I had to hold it in. If I let my emotions show now, everything could fall apart before I could do anything to protect Michael. Michael looked up from the newspaper, excited. "Mom, I have a very important meeting at the office today. If they approve this report, they might consider me for a promotion." He smiled, and his eyes shone with hope. I smiled back, but my gaze unintentionally shifted to Emily. She frowned for a fraction of a second so quickly that if I hadn't been paying attention, I would have missed it. Then she forced a twisted smile, as if hiding something. "Really, honey? That's great," she said in a syrupy voice, but I felt the lie in every syllable. Breakfast passed in silence. The only sound was the clinking of cutlery against the plates. After Michael kissed my forehead and rushed off to work, Emily stayed behind to clear the table. But I knew it was just an excuse. As soon as I turned my back to wash the dishes, I heard her pick up the phone and speak in a low voice, as if afraid someone would hear her. I stood still, pretending to clean the stove, but my ears were wide open. "You leave it to me," Emily whispered. "Michael definitely won't turn in the report on time. I've already taken care of it." My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't hear what was being said on the other end, but I assumed it was Daniel, her brother. Another trap, another attempt to make my son fail. At noon, I went to the market with Sarah, my neighbor and best friend. Under the intense sun, we walked between the stalls full of vegetables with the bustle of people in the background. But my heart was heavy. I couldn't focus on picking out cilantro or meat. Finally, I took Sarah to a secluded corner near the fish market. "Sarah, I have to tell you something." I began, my voice trembling. I told her about the voice message, everything Emily had said about Michael and her plan to sabotage him. Sarah's eyes widened, and she placed a hand on my shoulder. "Oh, Linda, my goodness, how could she? You have to do something. Don't let that woman keep hurting Michael." I nodded, but inside I was a mess. "I know, Sarah, but I have to be smart. If I act rashly, I'm afraid it will only make things worse for Michael." Sarah squeezed my shoulder firmly. "The truth always comes out, Linda. You just watch, gather evidence. I'll be here for whatever you need." Her words gave me strength, but I still felt a vague fear. I was afraid for Michael, and also for myself, for not having the courage to face the truth. When I got home, as soon as I opened the gate, I heard Michael yelling from inside. "Mom, I'm so glad you're here." His voice sounded desperate, not like his usual self. I went inside and saw him rummaging through a pile of papers on the table, his face pale. "Mom, I can't find the documents for this afternoon's meeting. I left them in my briefcase this morning and now they're gone." I looked around and saw Emily in a corner, with her arms crossed and a look of fake surprise. "But I left them on the table, honey. Didn't they fall out at the office?" she said, as if she had nothing to do with it. I watched in silence, and my eyes fell on the sofa. A stack of papers was sticking out from a crack in the cushion, as if someone had hidden it on purpose. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice calm as I bent down to pick them up. "Michael, could these be them?" I handed them to him, glancing sideways at Emily. He let out a sigh of relief and hugged me. "Thanks, Mom. Yes, these are them. I have to get back to the office now." Emily shot me a fleeting glance with a flash of annoyance, but she quickly turned away, pretending to be busy with her phone. I stood there watching Michael run out, feeling relieved and hurt at the same time. Relieved because my son had found his documents, but hurt because I knew that if I hadn't seen them, Michael would have failed his meeting. And the person behind it all was Emily. I wondered how far she had gone with her plan. How many more times would she try to ruin my son? That night, when everyone was supposedly asleep, I heard whispers from the living room again. I tiptoed down the stairs and hid behind the thick curtain, my heart in my throat. Emily's voice was low but sharp. "Yeah, bro, it almost worked today. I hid the papers, but that old woman found them. I have to be more careful." I clutched the edge of my blouse, trying to control my breathing so I wouldn't make a sound. Her words were another stab, confirming all my suspicions. Emily wasn't just bad-mouthing Michael, she was actively working to make him fail. I went back to my room in silence and lay down, but my eyes burned. I didn't cry, not because I was strong, but because I knew tears wouldn't solve anything. In my head, the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. The audio, Emily's fake expression, the hidden papers, and the secret call. It all pointed to one truth. Emily was no longer the daughter-in-law I had trusted. She was a danger to Michael, to this family. I couldn't keep this secret to myself any longer. The weight of the recording of Emily's actions was like a rock on my chest that wouldn't let me breathe. I had to do something. Find someone to talk to, not to vent, but to find the right path for Michael. I picked up the phone, and with trembling fingers, I dialed the number of Mr. Julian and Mrs. Beatrice Lopez, Emily's parents. I tried to keep my voice steady as I asked them to meet me at a small coffee shop near the house the next morning. "We need to talk," I said, without giving details. Mr. Lopez answered in his deep voice. "All right, Mrs. Linda, we'll be there." That morning, the day broke cold with a light drizzle, as if the sky was as heavy as my heart. I put on an old gray sweater and the shawl Michael had given me years ago. In front of the mirror, I saw my face, the deep wrinkles, the tired eyes, but with a spark of determination. I didn't want this meeting to turn into a fight, but I needed the truth to come out, and I hoped Emily's parents would understand. The coffee shop was tucked away in an alley with wooden tables close together and a delicious smell of roasted coffee in the air. I arrived early and chose a table near the window. I sat down, gripping my glass of water tightly, trying to gather my thoughts. When Mr. and Mrs. Lopez walked in, I immediately recognized his tall, gray-haired figure and Mrs. Lopez behind him with an old cloth bag and a worried expression. They looked at me with questioning eyes, as if they already guessed part of the story. I stood up, offered a forced smile, and invited them to sit. "Thank you for coming," I said in a low voice. "Can I get you some coffee?" They nodded, and I ordered 3 black coffees, no sugar. When the waitress brought the coffees, I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. "I want you to listen to something," I said, my voice calm but my heart racing. I played the recording. Emily's voice filled the silence of the cafe, sharp as a knife. "This Michael is so boring, so useless. He never makes enough money for me to live the way I deserve," she said with clear contempt. Then she continued talking about the divorce the rich man Daniel would introduce her to and how they were trying to make Michael fail. I watched Mr. and Mrs. Lopez. She turned pale, covered her mouth with her hand, and her eyes widened in horror. "My God, it can't be. Did my daughter and my son really say that?" she whispered, her voice about to break. Mr. Lopez tapped the table lightly. "From Daniel I expect it. He's always been a social climber. But Emily, how could she talk about her husband like that?" I remained silent, leaving the phone on the table so they could process what they had just heard. Then I told them everything slowly, how Emily sent the message by mistake, how she deleted it immediately, and how by pure luck I had saved it. I didn't want to believe it, I said, looking them in the eye. I loved Emily like a daughter. But what she said, what she's doing, I can't let her keep hurting my son. Mr. Lopez sat up straight, his face turning from pale to red with anger. He clenched his fists, holding back his rage. "Mrs. Linda," he said, his voice deep but firm, "we are incredibly ashamed. Michael is a good, hard-working man who loves our daughter, and for Emily to behave like this, I have no words to apologize." Mrs. Lopez, with tears in her eyes, took my hand. Hers was cold and trembling. "Forgive us. Forgive Michael," she said through sobs. "It was our fault for not raising our children right. We never imagined Emily was capable of something like this." I nodded, feeling a weight in my soul. A part of me felt sorry for them parents facing such a painful truth about their children, but another larger part felt a fire burning inside. I didn't want this to end with a simple confession. "It's time for everything to come out," I said, with more firmness than I expected. "I don't want Michael to keep living a lie, but I need your help. Emily and Daniel have to face the consequences of their actions." Mr. Lopez looked at me with determination, but also pain in his eyes. "You're right," he said. "We won't cover for them. But Mrs. Linda, what are you planning to do?" I shook my head, not answering immediately. A plan was beginning to form in my mind, but I wasn't ready to reveal it. "I'll find a way," I answered in a low but confident voice. "I just needed you to know the truth, and if necessary, to be on Michael's side." Mrs. Lopez wiped her tears and nodded. "Don't worry about that," she said. "We'll do whatever it takes to make amends. We just hope Michael can forgive us." I gave a bitter smile, not of joy, but because I knew this was only the first step. The battle wasn't over, and I needed more than an apology. Leaving the coffee shop, the drizzle was still falling. I clutched my shawl and walked slowly down the wet sidewalk. The smell of damp earth mixed with the scent of coffee that had clung to my clothes. I felt sorry for Mr. and Mrs. Lopez, but also a fierce determination. I thought of Michael, of his smile when he arrived with the pastries, of the dreams he had for his future. I couldn't let Emily take everything from him. I knew I still had a lot to do. Gather more evidence, find a way to confront Emily, and most importantly, protect my son from deeper wounds. After meeting with Mr. and Mrs. Lopez, I knew I couldn't stop there. My word alone against Emily's wouldn't be enough. I needed someone with more authority, someone who could make her actions have immediate consequences. I thought of Ms. Camilla Harris, Emily's direct boss at the communications agency. If anyone could set things straight, it was her. The next morning, I sat alone in the living room. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, drawing faint stripes on the floor. I picked up my phone and listened to the recording again. Emily's voice came through sharp and dismissive. "Michael is useless. I need a man who's worth it." Every time I listened, I felt my heart clench, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't let my emotions control me. I turned on Michael's old computer, the one he had left for me to use if I needed to look something up. I went to Emily's company website and looked for contact information. In a few minutes, I found Ms. Camilla Harris's email address. I sat in front of the screen fingers on the keyboard and wrote a short email. "Dear Ms. Camilla Harris," I wrote, "my name is Linda. I am the mother of Michael, the husband of your employee, Emily Torres. I am writing to share a truth about her. I apologize for the intrusion, but it is a matter of ethics. I am attaching a recording I received by accident." I attached the audio file. I reviewed every word, every period. I didn't want the email to sound angry or resentful. I just wanted the truth to be known. When I hit send, I felt my heart pound as if I had just thrown a stone into a calm lake. Barely 20 minutes later, my phone rang. An unknown number. I took a deep breath and answered. "Am I speaking with Mrs. Linda?" A voice on the other end said, serious and clear, but not cold. "I'm Camilla Harris, the director of the company where Emily works." I clutched the phone, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Yes, this is she," I replied. Ms. Harris was direct. "I've listened to the recording you sent me. Could you tell me more about this?" I told her everything briefly but precisely. The message sent by mistake, Emily's words in the recording, and how she had tried to hide Michael's documents to make him fail. I didn't exaggerate anything I just said, what I had seen and heard. Ms. Harris was silent for a moment and then said, "I've had suspicions about Emily for a while. She is engaged in several non-transparent behaviors, late submissions, lies about her project progress. But what you've given me is conclusive proof. Thank you for speaking up. I will handle this immediately." Her voice was firm, but I detected a hint of sadness, as if she too was disappointed in Emily. I hung up and sat there feeling like a weight had been lifted. but I was still uneasy inside. I thought about Michael, about his carefree smile every time he came home. How was I going to tell him that the wife he loved was conspiring to ruin his life? How could I protect him without causing him more pain? That afternoon, Michael came home earlier than usual. I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner when I heard the gate open. He came in with a somber face and slumped shoulders. He collapsed into a chair and put his hands on his head. "Mom," he said in a dull voice. "Emily called me today. She said they called her into the director's office. She doesn't know what happened, but she was crying a lot. I'm worried." I stopped chopping the knife, frozen in midair. I turned to look at my son and saw his eyes were red as if he were holding back tears. I feigned a sigh, put the knife down, and went to him. "It's probably just something from work, son," I said gently. "Don't worry too much. Everything will be fine." But inside, a mix of emotions washed over me. I knew the first blow had landed on Emily. Ms. Harris had acted, and I felt a little relief, but at the same time it pained me to see Michael worried about a wife who didn't deserve him. I wanted to hug him, to tell him everything, but I knew it wasn't the right time yet. That night, as I was knitting in the living room, a habit I had to calm my nerves, my phone lit up. A text message from Camilla Harris's number. "Emily Torres has been terminated. Her actions are not compatible with the professional ethics of this company. I thank you again for your honesty." I read the message over and over, feeling as if a huge rock had been lifted from my chest. I put the phone down on the table and let out a long sigh. One step of my plan was complete. The dim yellow light illuminated the cracked walls. Ms. Camilla Harris's message was still glowing on the phone screen, but I felt no satisfaction. The firing was just the first step, a small piece in the long journey I had to take to protect Michael. I knew that if I wanted my son to escape the web of lies Emily had woven, I had to bring the whole truth to light right before his eyes. But how could I do it without breaking his heart? That question drilled into my head like a cold wind. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of Sarah, my faithful neighbor, who had been with me through thick and thin. When she answered, I told her that Emily had been fired. My voice was a whisper, as if I was afraid someone would hear me, even though the house was completely silent. Sarah let out a bitter laugh. Everyone gets what they deserve. She thought she was so clever, but in the end, she had to pay. She paused and added seriously, "But be careful. Emily isn't one to give up easily. She'll find a way to get revenge, I'm sure of it." Her words were a warning that made me shiver. I asked her to keep it a secret, but I also said, "Sarah, if the time comes when I need you to be my witness, will you help me?" She answered without hesitation, "Linda, you know I'm always here for you. Call me whenever." That night, when Michael was already asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table with an old notebook and a pen. I started to write everything down, every date, every small detail I had witnessed. The day I received the recording, the day I saw Emily hide Michael's documents under the sofa, the day I met with her parents, and the day I sent the email to Ms. Harris. I wrote carefully with my handwriting trembling on the paper. Every memory was like a wound, but I forced myself to be strong. I took a large envelope, put my notes, and a copy of the recording that I had transferred to a USB drive inside. I locked it all in a drawer in my bedroom. That small lock was like a promise to myself. I wouldn't let anyone take this truth away from me. The next morning, I called Mr. and Mrs. Lopez again. I didn't want to wait any longer. When Mr. Lopez answered, I got straight to the point. "We need an occasion to confront Emily and Daniel face to face. Michael has to hear the truth or he'll continue to live a lie." There was a silence on the other end of the line, and then I heard Mr. Lopez sigh. "Mrs. Linda," he said in a sad voice, "we agree. Our daughter was wrong and she has to take responsibility. We just hope that one day Michael will forgive us." Mrs. Lopez chimed in with a choked voice. "We'll do whatever is necessary, ma'am. I just ask that you don't blame us too much." I nodded even though they couldn't see me and replied, "I don't blame you, but Michael deserves to know the truth." I decided the perfect occasion would be the upcoming family party, a gathering I had planned for a while to celebrate Michael's birthday. Everyone would be there. Michael, Emily, Daniel, and their parents. It would be the ideal moment for everything to come out. I knew that if I let this opportunity pass, Emily would continue her game and Michael would keep living in the illusion of a happy marriage. That day, I tried to make everything seem normal. Emily seemed to have no idea that I had sent the recording to her boss. She got ready for the party with complete nonchalance, laughing with Michael about the new dress she would wear to impress the family. "What do you think of this dress?" she asked Michael, showing off a bright red dress, her eyes sparkling as if she were acting in a play. Michael smiled and nodded. "You look beautiful, my love. You're going to leave everyone speechless with that." From a corner of the kitchen, watched the scene with a heavy heart. Emily's fakeness made me sick, but I just nodded, hiding a cold smile. Let her keep acting, I told myself. In a few days, it will all be over. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the table, the dim light illuminating my face in a small mirror. I checked my phone, making sure the recording was still there with a full battery. I opened the file, listened again to Emily's voice, and every word reminded me of my mission. I murmured as if talking to myself. Tomorrow, everything will be clear. Tomorrow, Michael will see the true face of the woman he trusted so much. The day of the family party, I got up when the sky was still dark before the first rays of sun appeared. My small kitchen filled with the aroma of Mole Michael's favorite dish since he was a child. I stood by the stove stirring the thick sauce, my hands nimble but my heart heavy. Today wasn't just Michael's birthday. It was the day he had to face the truth, the day everything would come to light. I also made some tamales, wrapping each one carefully, the same way I had wrapped my love for my son for so many years. But today those tamales weren't just food. They were part of the show I had to put on to make everything seem normal. Michael got up early and started decorating the living room. He hung yellow paper garlands from the ceiling, whistling a cheerful tune. "Mom, how does it look?" he asked, turning to me with a radiant smile. I nodded, forcing a smile, but I felt like someone was squeezing my heart. Seeing my son preparing his party with such innocence made me want to run and hug him to tell him that everything was about to change, that I wouldn't let him get hurt. But I couldn't. It wasn't time yet. Emily appeared later, coming down the stairs in her bright red dress and perfectly curled hair. She stood in front of the living room mirror, fixing her hair with a satisfied smile, as if nothing had happened. "How do I look, Mom?" she asked me in a sweet but fake voice. I looked at her. My eyes scanned her flashy dress, and I just nodded. "Very pretty, dear." But inside I felt a deep disgust. Emily's fakeness was a fragile mask, and I knew that today I would rip it off. In the afternoon, the guests started to arrive, Mr. and Mrs. Lopez came in with tense faces and sat together in a corner as if seeking comfort in each other. Sarah arrived with a bottle of wine as a gift with a kind smile, but her eyes met mine as if to say, "I'm here, don't worry." Daniel was the last to arrive with a bottle of tequila in his hand and a loud laugh. "Today we have to celebrate big. It's my brother-in-law's birthday." I looked at him and saw the same fake smile as Emily's. They were both acting, but I knew the show was about to end. Dinner began in a tense atmosphere. Everyone made a toast, and the clinking of glasses sounded hollow. I watched in silence, seeing how Mr. Lopez squeezed his wife's hand over and over, his eyes full of anguish. Mrs. Lopez barely spoke, just stared at her plate. Emily, on the other hand, wouldn't stop looking around, showing off her red dress, and laughing loudly as if she wanted to drown out the tension. Michael, sitting next to her, remained oblivious to it all, telling stories about his work, about the successful meeting the other day. Every word he said broke my heart. He didn't know that the wife sitting beside him was plotting to destroy everything. Halfway through dinner, while everyone was eating the mole, I stood up. My heart was pounding, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "Before we continue," I said, my gaze sweeping over each person in the room, "I have something I want everyone to hear." The room fell into a dead silence. I took the phone out of my pocket, and with a trembling hand I played the recording. Emily's voice echoed clear and sharp. "Michael is useless. I can't stand him anymore. You have to help me, bro. I need a man who's worth something." Then Daniel's voice was heard, slick and full of malice. "Don't worry, I have a rich, successful friend, and as for Michael, he just needs to fail a couple more times, and I'll replace him at the company myself." The air in the room seemed to freeze. All eyes were fixed on me and then turned to Emily. Michael went pale. The fork fell from his hand and clattered on the table. He stared at Emily with red-rimmed eyes, unable to believe what he was hearing. Emily jumped up, her face drained of all color. "This is a setup!" she screamed, her voice breaking. "You edited my voice! How dare you do something like that?" But before I could answer, Mr. Lopez slammed his fist on the table, his voice trembling with rage. "Shut up, Emily! It's your voice! It's your plan with Daniel! Do you think we're stupid?" Mrs. Lopez burst into tears, covering her face. "My God, you have shamed us, Emily! How could you treat Michael like this?" Daniel froze his gaze, lost, clutching the tequila bottle on the table. He couldn't say anything, just hung his head. I looked at Michael. He was still sitting motionless with an empty stare. Then he whispered, his voice broken. "All these years, was it all a lie?" I went to my son and squeezed his hand. It was ice cold and trembling, as if his whole world had just collapsed. I wanted to hug him to tell him everything would be okay, but I knew those words meant nothing at that moment. I just held his hand, hoping my strength could keep him from falling apart. "Son," I said in a low voice, a lump in my throat. "I'm here. I'll always be here." Emily didn't apologize. Instead of bowing her head, she lifted it defiantly. "Yes, I want a divorce. I don't need a useless husband like you. I have better opportunities." Her words were like knives, not just for Michael, but for me too. Daniel stood up, nodding coldly. "Let's go, Emily. We have nothing to do here." He took his sister's arm and pulled her out of the house. Emily tossed her hair back and walked out arrogantly as if she were the victor. The clicking of her heels echoed on the wooden floor, and the door slammed shut, making the whole house tremble. I stood there, feeling my heart tremble with that sound. Michael was still sitting, saying nothing, his gaze lost in the void. I approached him and put a hand on his shoulder, but my hand was shaking. "Michael," I called softly, but he didn't respond. Then, as if it took all his strength, he whispered, "If you've already decided, then go." He accepted the divorce. His voice was barely a murmur, but firm, as if he had just let go of a large part of his life. I wanted to hug him to say something to ease his pain, but I knew no words could heal that wound right now. Mr. Lopez came over. His tall figure now looked stooped and tired. He put a hand on Michael's shoulder and said in a grave but sincere voice, "Son, believe me, this is not your fault. My children are the ones who have brought this shame. I ask for your forgiveness from the bottom of my heart." Mrs. Lopez was crying inconsolably. She took my hand and said through sobs, "Mrs. Linda, forgive us. My daughter did a terrible thing, but we won't cover for her. We are so ashamed that we didn't raise our children right." I looked at her and saw the pain in her eyes. I understood that they were suffering, too shattered by the truth. Sarah, my neighbor, stood up, silently poured a glass of water and put it in Michael's hand. "Son, drink this," she whispered with a mother's tenderness. "You need to calm down. Everything is going to be all right." Michael took the glass, but his hand trembled so much that the water spilled. He didn't drink, just stared at the glass as if looking for an answer in it. I sat beside him and hugged him. I felt his body shake like a lost child. I stroked his back, trying to give him my strength. "You're not a fool, Michael," I said, my voice hoarse with emotion. "You just love truly, and that is never a mistake." He didn't answer, just whispered almost inaudibly, "Mom, I was so stupid to trust her. I thought she loved me." Those words were like a stab, not because I was angry with him, but because it hurt me to see him blame himself for loving someone who didn't deserve it. That night, the party ended in silence. The guests left one by one without another word. All that remained were the dim lights of the living room illuminating the plates of cold food on the table. I stayed by Michael's side without moving. He didn't cry, but I knew his pain was greater than any tears. I thought about all the years I raised him, the sleepless nights I worked just so he could have a better future, and now seeing him sitting there like a tree felled by a storm, I felt my heart break into 1,000 pieces. Outside, a dog's bark could be heard in the distance, mixed with the whistling of the wind. Darkness enveloped the house, but inside me a new chapter had just begun. I knew the real storm was just beginning. Emily and Daniel were gone, but the wounds they left would not heal easily. After the night Emily and Daniel left, the house felt strangely empty, as if all the joy had vanished. The walls that once echoed with Michael's laughter, with his carefree whistling, now only held a heavy silence. Michael was no longer my radiant son. He would go to work in the morning and come back at night, quiet, withdrawn, with sunken eyes, as if he were carrying all the world's pain. I would look at him and feel my heart twist. I wanted to hug him, to tell him everything would be okay, but I knew those words meant nothing to him right then. He had lost the woman he loved, the one he trusted, and I, despite having done everything to protect him, felt helpless in the face of his pain. To cheer Michael up a bit, I asked Sarah to come visit often. She, with her cheerful personality and her gossip from the market, always managed to make the atmosphere less heavy. One morning, Sarah and I went to the downtown market together, as was our custom. The smell of fresh vegetables, the bustle of the people, and the sun filtering through the roofs of the stalls used to lift my spirits. But that day, my mind was still stuck on thoughts of Michael. I was picking out a bunch of cilantro when Sarah gently pulled my arm and whispered, "Linda, have you heard? They're talking about Emily over there." I looked up curious. Sarah pointed to a vegetable stall on the other side where some ladies were whispering. I moved closer, pretending to pick out tomatoes, but my ears were wide open. One of the vendors, a woman with her hair in a bun, said, while peeling potatoes, "That Emily girl is jobless and keeps moving from place to place. She moves every month. They say she left all her things, that she's just carrying a couple of suitcases. She's staying with people, poor thing." Another lady arranging carrots added, "Yeah, and the rich guy her brother introduced her to turned out to be married with kids. Last week, it was in the newspaper that he's being investigated for fraud. So much for the life of luxury she dreamed of." I stood there, my hand trembling, placing a fish in the basket of the next stall, even though I had no intention of buying it. Their words were like hammer blows to my head. The image of Emily leaving my house with her head held high, with her arrogant gesture, and her promise of a better opportunity contrasted completely with what I had just heard. She had traded Michael's happiness, his entire family, for an empty dream, and now she was paying the price. Sarah took my hand and nodded with a look that said it all. What goes around comes around, Linda. She thought she was so clever, but in the end, she only earned her own misfortune. On the way home, I walked slower than usual. The words from the market kept echoing in my head. I didn't feel happy, not out of malice, but because I knew that no matter how low Emily fell, it wouldn't erase Michael's pain. I thought of my son, how he sat in silence every night, not talking about his work, not whistling like before. Every time I saw him, I felt my heart ache. I had protected him from Emily's schemes, but I couldn't protect him from the wound he carried inside. That night I made a simple dinner, rice beans and a little chicken. Michael came home and, like every day, took off his shoes in silence and hung up his jacket. He looked at me, trying to force a smile. "Mom, I'm really tired today. I'm going to bed after dinner." I nodded, but inside I felt a knot. I wanted to tell him what I had heard at the market, tell him that Emily didn't deserve his pain, but I held back. He had suffered enough. I didn't want to rub salt in the wound. I just said, "Of course, son, eat. I made the beans you like." I got up and went out to the patio. The night sky was full of stars, but I didn't feel at peace. A part of me felt a small sense of comfort. Justice had been served, even if I wasn't the one who delivered it. But that comfort vanished quickly when I thought of Michael. I knew that no matter how much Emily failed, it wouldn't give my son back the years of happiness he deserved. I went back inside, sat down and hugged my glass of cold water. I promised myself I wouldn't tell Michael anything about those rumors. He needed time to heal, to find himself again. I looked at the family photo hanging on the wall where Michael was a little boy, holding my hand with a radiant smile. I whispered as if to myself, "Son, I'll be here waiting for the day you smile again. No matter how long it takes, I'll wait." Time passed slow but steady, like raindrops soaking dry earth. My home, which had been heavy with a painful silence since Emily's departure, slowly regained some of its warmth. Michael, my son, began to recover, even if it was in small steps. He was no longer the withdrawn young man from the early days, no longer staring into space in the living room. He focused on his work, staying up late, preparing reports, taking care of every detail. I heard his colleagues call him, praising his dedication and honesty, and I felt my soul lighten a bit. But I was still worried, afraid that the wound in his heart was still there, deep and latent, even if he hid it with forced smiles. One afternoon while I was knitting on the patio, I heard the iron gate creak. I looked up and saw Michael walk in, but this time he wasn't alone. Beside him walked a petite young woman in a simple blue dress and her hair pulled back. She smiled with bright, sincere eyes, and in her hands she carried a basket of fruit. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Linda," she said in a soft voice. "I'm Lucy Davis. I'm an elementary school teacher. Michael has told me a lot about you." I stood up a little surprised, but her smile gave me a strange warmth. "Hello, dear," I replied, accepting the basket. "Come in, have a seat. I'll make you some fresh juice." Dinner that night was special, with a warmth we hadn't felt in a long time. I made the pozole that Michael loves so much with some tostadas and a little salad. Lucy sat next to him, chatting naturally, asking me how I prepared the dish, and then turning to Michael. "Are you enjoying it, Michael? I love your mom's cooking." Michael smiled a genuine smile, effortless without shadows. "It's delicious, Lucy," he replied, and his eyes sparkled like they used to. I looked at my son, saw that smile, and felt my heart fill with warmth. It had been so long since I'd seen him smile like that, without the darkness that weighed on his gaze. Lucy was attentive to every detail. When I ran out of water, she quietly got up to pour me more, and then she put more lettuce on my plate. "Have some more, Mom. The vegetables are very fresh." She wasn't boastful or trying to impress, but every one of her gestures showed pure sincerity. After dinner, while I was clearing the dishes, Lucy rolled up her sleeves and stood beside me at the sink. "Let me help you, Mom," she said with a smile. I looked at her and saw a world of difference from Emily. No fancy dresses, no sweet, false words, just a simple, good-hearted girl. In the following days, Lucy visited us frequently. She would accompany me to the market, picking out vegetables with me laughing when I told her stories from my years in the neighborhood. Once she helped Michael organize some work papers, sitting beside him at the kitchen table, patiently reading each page. "You should pay more attention to this part," she told him, pointing to a number, her voice soft but confident. Michael nodded, looking at her with gratitude. I from a corner pretended to chop an onion, but inside I felt a great joy. I realized that Lucy truly loved Michael not for his money or his position, but for who he was, the hard-working, honest man I had raised. One afternoon I sat on the patio watching the sunset paint the street orange. The wind blew gently, ruffling my gray hair. I sighed not with sadness, but with a peace I rarely felt. I thought about everything we had been through. Emily's betrayal, Michael's tears, the sleepless nights trying to figure out how to protect my son. But I also thought about the truth, about the justice that had come, albeit late, and about the hope that was now blossoming. Lucy, with her sincere smile and noble heart, was like a ray of light in the darkness we had endured. I murmured as if talking to myself, "Betrayal can destroy a family, but truth and integrity always pave the way for a new dawn." And sometimes those who leave out of greed find themselves left with only their own shame. I thought of Emily, of the rumors from the market of how she had traded everything for an empty dream, but I no longer felt anger. She had chosen her path, and I chose to stay by Michael's side, helping him rebuild his life. I looked down the street and saw Michael and Lucy walking back, holding hands, chatting animatedly. Michael turned to look at me and waved. "Mom, Lucy and I are going to make flan for you today." I smiled and nodded. "Of course, son. I'll be waiting for you here." For the first time in many months, I felt a true sense of relief. The storm had passed, and although the scars remained, I knew that my son and I had found a new page, a brighter one full of hope. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes, I really wonder. If you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light someone else's path. God always blesses, and I am convinced that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the end screen, I leave you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.